Welcome everybody to the Critics Corner. I'm still Andrew Branca with the Waxahachie Sun. I'm here with Mr. David Dunn, Mr. Movie Man, movie aficionado, and friend and colleague. We've got a treat in for you today. It's one of my favorite movies. It was one of my first films that my parents actually let me see when I was a kid that wasn't really animated. That actually was kind of adult. It's and funny thing is actually it's produced by Disney. It's called the Rocketeer. It came out in 1991. I just really love this film and the graphic novel that it is based off of, actually.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like you said, this is based off of a graphic novel. The story follows a airplane pilot by the name of Cliff Secord, who is looking to participate in the Nationals race. When all of a sudden he gets caught up in this wild, web conspiracy involving, among other things, Howard Hughes, Nazis, and a rocket pack, a pack that you could literally strap on your back and take off. Originally wanting to use this invention for his own personal profitable uses, he ends up finding himself going off on crazy adventures as the Rocketeer. And this, man, Andy, what a movie to kick off your movie viewing history, brother. I mean, this is a very fun, action-packed, and cheesy in cheek, but really, really, really fun period sort of adventure. I feel like this movie is kind of like a fusion of Iron Man and Indiana Jones a little bit.
Like
it just has that swashbuckling feel to it, but also that high stakes superheroic adventure feeling to it at the same time. It's very, very bold for its time.
Oh, it's very bold. It's very plucky. Yeah, and also, I mean, it's got a great cast with it too. I mean, you have Timothy Dalton, Mr. James Bond, who was in 2 Bond movies in the 80s. I mean, Paul Savino, Jennifer Connelly, Alan Arkin's in this. Oh my gosh. The list really goes on and on. And I'm just a big fan of this movie because it's fun. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of quirkiness to it that just fits right in. And, as a kid, who doesn't like the idea of strapping on a jetpack and going and saving the day? I mean, come on. I so wanted the helmet he wears in this movie.
The helmet was great. The costume was great. Everything setting wise really speaks to the period that this film is set in, which is 1938 more specifically, which makes sense. Nazis, World War II, Howard Hughes.
Gangsters.
Yeah, that whole thing. And really, it's kind of this movie. Like, it has every 30s trope it could possibly fit and cram into this movie. But it doesn't feel contrived. It doesn't feel artificial. Rather, it does feel artificial, but it feels artificial in the fun way. It's very lighthearted. It's very fun. Bill Campbell especially was great in this movie. He kind of felt like a 1980s Brendan Fraser, just this guy that is just so well-intentioned and wholesome, but also kind of smug and overconfident at the same time. Like, he's a really good character, and he anchors both the action and the drama of this film really well.
Yeah, I would never would have thought of comparing him to Brendan Fraser, but you're right. It definitely has that mummy-esque type feel that Brendan Fraser brought to the character he had in The Mummy. Billy Campbell does the same thing with Cliff Secord. And, I think the other really good thing about this movie is the soundtrack that goes with it. James Horner is the composer of this, and unfortunately, he's no longer with us anymore. I think he died 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But just the score on this movie is just as big as a part as the actions, and I think if you had something else that was in its place, it it wouldn't have worked. And tragically enough, this movie is about aviation. Horner died in a single engine plane crash, which is very sad to say.
Yeah, it's interesting the irony of all of that flowing together. But speaking on behalf of the movie, you're right, Andy. The music is adventurous. It's high spirits. It's has a great upbeat sort of melody to it. It's the kind of music really I kind of miss having nowadays in movies because you don't really get traditional movie soundtracks like this nowadays. You get movie soundtracks that are either experimental or atmospheric or thematic. You don't really get anything that feels as operatic as this does. But the music is a very vital component to this movie, and it does a really good job emotionally conveying what the movie is as a whole.
Well, I've also got to say, I mean, who doesn't want to fight a bunch of bad guys and save the day, save the country, and kiss a girl?
Yeah, yeah. It's so classic in that feeling. And yes, while I'll say the movie is abundantly cheesy, it is silly. It is
no doubt.
There are scenes where you look at it and you're like, did they really? Okay, this movie is definitely, a sign of the times, but it never annoys you. It never gets to the point where it's like, okay, get on with it. It's high stakes, it's adventurous, it's fun. You just have a blast watching it. This is classical, quintessential blockbuster filmmaking.
Yeah, definitely. And one of those lines in that movie that really speak to the cheesiness of kind of the characters is towards the end. They're in this big epic battle with the gangsters and the FBI versus the Nazis, and the head gangster guy. He essentially says, I'm not comfortable I'm an American, but I'm not going to work for a Nazi or not going to work for a Kraut or something. I mean, just it's like, dude, you're already a criminal anyways. I mean, but patriotism never gets in the way.
I did. Well, yeah, that was cheesy, but I also love the sentiment behind that. And that's,
oh yeah, of course,
the heart of it really lies. Like, the situations are very unrealistic, but the sentiments behind it are real and very sweet and very grounded. And we've talked a few times about how hokey this movie feels, but really this movie's kind of in the pocket for the filmmaker, Joe Johnston. He has a very, very big career behind him, making movies like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Jumanji, October Sky, and more recently, Captain America, the First Avenger. And this kind of period film really kind of goes perfectly with him. Like, you described it earlier, like The Mummy, how silly and over the top that was. This movie is silly and over the top, but in a fun way, in a positive way, in an upbeat way, in a way that feels perfect for just sitting in your seat and munching down some popcorn.
Definitely. And I miss those movies. A lot of those type of movies, those plucky kind of adventure, cheesy but good-hearted nature movies aren't really made a whole lot anymore. And I definitely miss that niche that used to be there. I mean, Brendan Fraser, I would say, was probably one of the last actors who really did a good type of movie in that kind of genre, so to speak.
You definitely don't see movies like this nowadays, Andy. And I even with the modern day Marvel movies, which I think are most comparable to something like this, even then, those movies carry very heavy themes, ranging from race and division and politics. It just so many things with it, and they're pretty emotional too. Like, they're very well done in balancing between its blockbuster action and its heftier themes. This one is just action, adventure, fun, all that stuff, and it really is kind of a sweet little gem, like a little treasure you can stow away in a time vault, like it, so to speak.
Oh, definitely. And if you don't get to see the movie, I recommend the graphic novel. I believe it was written by Dave Stevens. I have a copy of it at home. It's a very treasured possession of mine. Uh, I think it's pretty dog-eared. I've had it since I was a kid. It's just something I really love, and I wanted to be the Rocketeer after I saw this movie for the first time, and yeah, it's definitely a kind of a one of those favorites that always sticks with you.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know why. Like, Disney is supposedly developing a sequel, like 30 years after the original movie came out. So I don't know what the point is at this point. I don't know what a sequel would look like. I'm curious about it, but I also don't want them to taint what this movie is.
Exactly.
It's its own, nifty little thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, like we've said before with other movies, doing a prime example, Coming to America. I love the original movie that came out, I believe, in 1988. Just fantastic comedy movie, great premise. Oh, they realized, oh, well, that was a great movie for people back in the day. Let's see if we can make a buck off of it and play off their emotions and their feelings connected with this film. And they released Coming to the number 2 America this year, and it was a atrocious train wreck of a film. I hate that movie. I hate Eddie Murphy for even saying, "Hey, I want to be a part of that project," because Eddie Murphy has done some great movies, and so has Arsenio Hall.
I mean, we could save that review for another time, but
Yeah,
at the very least, Rocketeer is well made. Bill Campbell is amazing in the movie. Alan Arkin is amazing in the movie. Jennifer Connelly is amazing in the movie. And if you didn't know about this movie beforehand, definitely should check it out. It's definitely one of the more unique superhero action movies out there.
Definitely. And I would say, with it being produced in 1991, it holds up fairly well. I mean, there's a couple spots you can, okay, I can notice maybe it's a little bit of age on it, but for the most part, it holds up fairly well. I mean, all these, 30 years later, I guess, 29, 30 years later, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's how it is.
So, we've come to a point where we need to give a rating for this film on 1 to 10. How many stars do you give this?
Solid 8. As I've mentioned, there are cheesy moments in this movie, and when they're here, they're abundantly cheesy. But what I find special about this movie is that it doesn't take away from the overall enjoyment of the picture. It is still fun. It is still enjoyable. It is still a worthwhile experience despite some of the sillier moments in this movie.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. I give this an 8 as well. Definitely has a number of cheesy moments, particularly more like the Lurch type henchman character they use to, try to get information out of people. So he's very cheesy. So yeah, I would give it a solid 8. It's a great watch. It's fun. You can watch it with your kids, and they won't have any nightmares or anything like that. And it's definitely a good movie and a good time to watch. And it's cheap to rent on Amazon Prime. I think it was like $4.
And Disney Plus for free on Disney Plus.
Yep. So that is going to do it for today's edition of the Critics Corner. Please come back next week. If you have any suggestions, send us an email. Check us out on Facebook. We'll be happy to answer questions, listen to movie suggestions, or just chat with you about movies. So that's going to do it for today's corner. So we will see you guys next week.
See y'all next week.